Part 2 of Chapter 8 of Mysticism and Logic and Other Essays, by Bertrand Russell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Landon D.C. Elkind at the University of Iowa in Iowa City, Iowa. The relation of sense data to physics. 8. The placing of things and sensibilia in perspective space. The world which we have so far constructed is a world of 6 dimensions, since it is a three-dimensional series of perspectives, each of which is itself three-dimensional. We have now to explain the correlation between the perspective space and the various private spaces contained within the various perspectives severally. It is by means of this correlation that the one three-dimensional space of physics is constructed. And it is because of the unconscious performance of this correlation that the distinction between perspective space and the percipient's private space has been blurred, with disastrous results for the philosophy of physics. Let us revert to our penny. The perspectives in which the penny appears larger are regarded as being nearer to the penny than those in which it appears smaller. But as far as experience goes, the apparent size of the penny will not grow beyond a certain limit, namely that where, as we say, the penny is so near the eye that if it were any nearer, it could not be seen. By touch we may prolong the series until the penny touches the eye, but no further. If we have been travelling along a line of perspectives in the previously defined sense, we may, however, by imagining the penny removed, prolong the line of perspectives by means, say, of another penny. And the same may be done with any other line of perspectives defined by means of the penny. All these lines meet in a certain place, that is, in a certain perspective. This perspective will be defined as the place where the penny is. It is now evident in what sense two places in constructed physical space are associated with a given sensibile. There is first the place which is the perspective of which the sensibile is a member. This is the place from which the sensibile appears. Secondly, there is the place where the thing is, of which the sensibile is a member, in other words, an appearance. This is the place at which the sensibile appears. The sensibile, which is a member of one perspective, is correlated with another perspective, namely that which is the place where the thing is, of which the sensibile is an appearance. To the psychologist, the place from which is the more interesting, and the sensibile accordingly appears to him subjective and where the percipient is. To the physicist, the place at which is the more interesting, and the sensibile accordingly appears to him physical and external. The causes, limits, and partial justification of each of these two apparently incompatible views are evident from the above duplicity of places associated with a given sensibile. We have seen that we can assign to a physical thing a place in the perspective space. In this way, different parts of our body acquire positions in perspective space, and therefore there is a meaning, whether true or false need not much concern us, in saying that the perspective to which our sense data belong is inside our head. Since our mind is correlated with the perspective to which our sense data belong, we may regard this perspective as being the position of our mind in perspective space. If, therefore, this perspective is, in the above defined sense, inside our head, there is a good meaning for the statement that the mind is in the head. We can now say of the various appearances of a given thing that some of them are nearer to the thing than others. Those are nearer which belong to perspectives that are nearer to the place where the thing is. We can thus find a meaning, true or false, for the statement that more is to be learnt about a thing by examining it close than by viewing it from a distance. We can also find a meaning for the phrase, the things which intervene between the subject and a thing of which an appearance is a datum to him. One reason often alleged for the subjectivity of sense data is that the appearance of a thing may change when we find it hard to suppose that the thing itself has changed. For example, when the change is due to our shutting our eyes, or to our screwing them up so as to make the thing look double. If the thing is defined as the class of its appearances, which is the definition adopted above, there is of course necessarily some change in the thing whenever any one of its appearances changes. Nevertheless, there is a very important distinction between two different ways in which the appearances may change. If, after looking at a thing, I shut my eyes, the appearance of my eyes changes in every perspective in which there is such an appearance, whereas most of the appearances of the thing will remain unchanged. We may say, as a matter of definition, that a thing changes when, however near to the thing an appearance of it may be, there are changes in appearances as near as, or still nearer to, the thing. On the other hand, we shall say that the change is in some other thing if all appearances of the thing which are at not more than a certain distance from the thing remain unchanged, while only comparatively distant appearances of the thing are altered. From this consideration, we are naturally led to the consideration of matter, which must be our next topic. 9. The definition of matter. We defined the physical thing as the class of its appearances, but this can hardly be taken as a definition of matter. We want to be able to express the fact that the appearance of a thing in a given perspective is causally affected by the matter between the thing and the perspective. We have found a meaning for between a thing and a perspective, but we want matter to be something other than the whole class of its appearances of a thing, in order to state the influence of matter on appearances. We commonly assume that the information we get about a thing is more accurate when the thing is nearer. Far off we see it is a man, then we see it is Jones, then we see he is smiling. Complete accuracy would only be attainable at a limit. If the appearances of Jones as we approach him tend towards a limit, that limit may be taken to be what Jones really is. It is obvious that, from the point of view of physics, the appearances of a thing close to count more than the appearances far off. We may therefore set up the following tentative definition. The matter of a given thing is the limit of its appearances as their distance from the thing diminishes. It seems probable that there is something in this definition, but it is not quite satisfactory, because empirically there is no such limit to be obtained from sense data. The definition will have to be eked out by constructions and definitions, but probably it suggests the right direction in which to look. We are now in a position to understand in outline the reverse journey from matter to sense data which is performed by physics. The appearance of a thing in a given perspective is a function of the matter composing the thing and of the intervening matter. The appearance of a thing is altered by intervening smoke or mist, by blue spectacles, or by alterations in the sense organs or nerves of the percipient, which also must be reckoned as part of the intervening medium. The nearer we approach the thing, the less its appearance is affected by the intervening matter. As we travel further and further from the thing, its appearances diverge more and more from their initial character, and the causal laws of their divergence are to be stated in terms of the matter which lies between them and the thing. Since the appearances at very small distances are less affected by causes other than the thing itself, we come to think that the limit towards which these appearances tend as the distance diminishes is what the thing really is, as opposed to what it merely seems to be. This, together with its necessity for the statement of causal laws, seems to be the source of the entirely erroneous feeling that matter is more real than sense data. Consider, for example, the infinite divisibility of matter. In looking at a given thing and approaching it, one sense datum will become several, and each of these things will again divide. Thus, one appearance may represent many things, and to this process there seems no end. Hence, in the limit, when we approach indefinitely near to the thing, there will be an indefinite number of units of matter corresponding to what, at a finite distance, is only one appearance. This is how infinite divisibility arises. The whole causal efficacy of a thing resides in its matter. This is, in some sense, an empirical fact, but it would be hard to state it precisely because causal efficacy is difficult to define. What can be known empirically about the matter of a thing is only approximate, because we cannot get to know the appearances of the thing from very small distances, and cannot accurately infer the limit of those appearances. But it is inferred approximately by means of the appearances we can observe. It then turns out that these appearances can be exhibited by physics as a function of the matter in our immediate neighborhood. For example, the visual appearance of a distant object is a function of the light waves that reach the eyes. This leads to confusions of thought, but offers no real difficulty. One appearance of a visible object, for example, is not sufficient to determine its other simultaneous appearances, although it goes a certain distance towards determining them. The determination of the hidden structure of a thing, so far as it is possible at all, can only be effected by means of elaborate dynamical inferences. 10. Time. Footnote 1. On this subject compare A Theory of Time and Space by Mr. A. Robb, Cambridge University Press, which first suggested to me the views advocated here, though I have, for present purposes, omitted what is most interesting and novel in his theory. Mr. Robb has given a sketch of his theory in a pamphlet with the same title. Heffer and Sons, Cambridge, 1913. End of footnote 1. It seems that the one all-embracing time is a construction, like the one all-embracing space. Physics itself has become conscious of this fact through the discussions connected with relativity. Between two perspectives which both belong to one person's experience, there will be a direct time relation of before and after. This suggests a way of dividing history in the same sort of way as it is divided by different experiences, but without introducing experience or anything mental. We may define a biography as everything that is, directly, earlier or later than, or simultaneous with, a given sensibile. This will give a series of perspectives, which might all form parts of one person's experience, though it is not necessary that all or any of them should actually do so. By this means, the history of the world is divided into a number of mutually exclusive biographies. We have now to correlate the times in the different biographies. The natural thing would be to say that the appearances of a given momentary thing in two different perspectives belonging to different biographies are to be taken as simultaneous. But this is not convenient. Suppose A shouts to B, and B replies as soon as he hears A's shout. Then between A's hearing of his own shout and his hearing of B's there is an interval. Thus, if we made A's and B's hearing of the same shout exactly simultaneous with each other, we should have events exactly simultaneous with a given event, but not with each other. To obviate this, we assume a velocity of sound. That is, we assume that the time when B hears A's shout is halfway between the time when A hears his own shout and the time when he hears B's. In this way, the correlation is effected. What has been said about sound applies, of course, equally to light. The general principle is that the appearances in different perspectives, which are to be grouped together as constituting what a certain thing is at a certain moment, are not to be all regarded as being at that moment. On the contrary, they spread outward from the thing with various velocities according to the nature of the appearances. Since no direct means exist of correlating the time in one biography with the time in another, this temporal grouping of the appearances belonging to a given thing at a given moment is in part conventional. Its motive is partly to secure the verification of such maxims as that events which are exactly simultaneous with the same event are exactly simultaneous with each other, partly to secure convenience in the formulation of causal laws. 11. The persistence of things and matter. Apart from any of the fluctuating hypotheses of physics, three main problems arise in connecting the world of physics with the world of sense, namely, 1. The construction of a single space, 2. The construction of a single time, 3. The construction of permanent things or matter. We have already considered the first and second of these problems. It remains to consider the third. We have seen how correlated appearances in different perspectives are combined to form one thing at one moment in the all-embracing time of physics. We have now to consider how appearances at different times are combined as belonging to one thing, and how we arrive at the persistent matter of physics. The assumption of permanent substance, which technically underlies the procedure of physics, cannot of course be regarded as metaphysically legitimate. Just as the one thing simultaneously seen by many people is a construction, so the one thing seen at different times by the same or different people must be a construction, being in fact nothing but a certain grouping of certain sensibilia. We have seen that the momentary state of a thing is an assemblage of sensibilia in different perspectives, not all simultaneous in the one constructed time, but spreading out from the place where the thing is, with velocities depending upon the nature of the sensibilia. The time at which the thing is in this state is the lower limit of the times at which these appearances occur. We have now to consider what leads us to speak of another set of appearances as belonging to the same thing at a different time. For this purpose, we may, at least to begin with, confine ourselves within a single biography. If we can always say when two sensibilia in a given biography are appearances of one thing, then, since we have seen how to connect sensibilia in different biographies as appearances of the same momentary state of a thing, we shall have all that is necessary for the complete construction of the history of a thing. It is to be observed, to begin with, that the identity of a thing for common sense is not always correlated with the identity of matter for physics. A human body is one persisting thing for common sense, but for physics its matter is constantly changing. We may say broadly that the common sense conception is based upon continuity in appearances at the ordinary distances of sense data, while the physical conception is based upon the continuity of appearances at very small distances from the thing. It is probable that the common sense conception is not capable of complete precision. Let us therefore concentrate our attention upon the conception of the persistence of matter in physics. The first characteristic of two appearances of the same piece of matter at different times is continuity. The two appearances must be connected by a series of intermediaries, which, if time and space form compact series, must themselves form a compact series. The color of the leaves is different in autumn from what it is in summer, but we believe that the change occurs gradually, and that if the colors are different at two given times, there are intermediate times at which the colors are intermediate between those at the given times. But there are two considerations that are important as regards continuity. First, it is largely hypothetical. We do not observe any one thing continuously, and it is merely a hypothesis to assume that, while we are not observing it, it passes through conditions intermediate between those in which it is perceived. During uninterrupted observation, it is true continuity is nearly verified. But even here, when motions are very rapid, as in the case of explosions, the continuity is not actually capable of direct verification. Thus, we can only say that the sense data are found to permit a hypothetical complement of sensibilia, such as will preserve continuity, and that therefore there may be such a complement. Since, however, we have already made such use of hypothetical sensibilia, we will let this point pass, and admit such sensibilia as are required to preserve continuity. Secondly, continuity is not a sufficient criterion of material identity. It is true that in many cases, such as rocks, mountains, tables, chairs, and so on, where the appearances change slowly, continuity is sufficient. But in other cases, such as the parts of an approximately homogeneous fluid, it fails us utterly. We can travel by sensibly continuous gradations from any one drop of the sea at any one time to any other drop at any other time. We infer the motions of sea water from the effects of the current, but they cannot be inferred from direct sensible observation together with the assumption of continuity. The characteristic required in addition to continuity is conformity with the laws of dynamics. Starting from what common sense regards as persistent things, and making only such modifications as from time to time seem reasonable, we arrive at assemblages of sensibilia, which are found to obey certain simple laws, namely those of dynamics. By regarding sensibilia at different times as belonging to the same piece of matter, we are able to define motion, which presupposes the assumption or construction of something persisting throughout the time of the motion. The motions which are regarded as occurring during a period in which all the sensibilia and the times of their appearance are given will be different according to the manner in which we combine sensibilia at different times as belonging to the same piece of matter. Thus, even when the whole history of the world is given in every particular, the question what motions take place is still to a certain extent arbitrary, even after the assumption of continuity. Experience shows that it is possible to determine motions in such a way as to satisfy the laws of dynamics, and that this determination, roughly and on the whole, is fairly in agreement with the common sense opinions about persistent things. This determination, therefore, is adopted, and leads to a criterion by which we can determine, sometimes practically, sometimes only theoretically, whether two appearances at different times are to be regarded as belonging to the same piece of matter. The persistence of all matter throughout all time can, I imagine, be secured by definition. To recommend this conclusion, we must consider what it is that is proved by the empirical success of physics. What is proved is that its hypotheses, though unverifiable, where they go beyond sense data, are at no point in contradiction with sense data, but on the contrary are ideally such as to render all sense data calculable when a sufficient condition of sensibilia is given. Now, physics has found it empirically possible to collect sense data into series, each series being regarded as belonging to one thing, and behaving, with regard to the laws of physics, in a way in which series not belonging to one thing would in general not behave. If it is to be unambiguous whether two appearances belong to the same thing or not, there must be only one way of grouping appearances so that the resulting things obey the laws of physics. It would be very difficult to prove that this is the case, but for our present purposes we may let this point pass, and assume that there is only one way. Thus we may lay down the following definition. Physical things are those series of appearances whose matter obeys the laws of physics. That such series exist is an empirical fact, which constitutes the verifiability of physics. 12. Illusions, hallucinations, and dreams. It remains to ask how, in our system, we are to find a place for sense data which apparently fail to have the usual connection with the world of physics. Such sense data are of various kinds, requiring somewhat different treatment. But all are of the sort that would be called unreal, and therefore, before embarking upon the discussion, certain logical remarks must be made upon the conceptions of reality and unreality. Mr. A. Wolf, footnote 1, Natural Realism and Present Tendencies in Philosophy, Proceedings of the Aristotelian Society, 1908 to 1909, page 165, end of footnote 1, says, "The conception of mind as a system of transparent activities is, I think, also untenable because of its failure to account for the very possibility of dreams and hallucinations. It seems impossible to realize how a bare transparent activity can be directed to what is not there, to apprehend what is not given." This statement is one which, probably, most people would endorse. But it is open to two objections. First, it is difficult to see how an activity, however untransparent, can be directed towards a nothing. A term of a relation cannot be a mere nonentity. Secondly, no reason is given, and I am convinced that none can be given, for the assertion that dream objects are not there and not given. Let us take the second point first. 1. The belief that dream objects are not given comes, I think, from failure to distinguish, as regards waking life, between the sense datum and the corresponding thing. In dreams, there is no such corresponding thing as the dreamer supposes. If, therefore, the thing were given in waking life, as, for example, Meinong maintains, footnote 1, Die Erfahrungen Grundlagen unseres Wissens, page 28, end of footnote 1, then there would be a difference in respect of givenness between dreams and waking life. But if, as we have maintained, what is given is never the thing, but merely one of the sensibilia which compose the thing, then what we apprehend in a dream is just as much given as what we apprehend in waking life. Exactly the same argument applies as to the dream objects being there. They have their position in the private space of the perspective of the dreamer. Where they fail is in their correlation with other private spaces, and therefore with perspective space. But in the only sense in which there can be a datum, they are there, just as truly as any of the sense data of waking life. 2. The conception of illusion or unreality and the correlative conception of reality are generally used in a way which embodies profound logical confusions. Words that go in pairs, such as real and unreal, existent and non-existent, valid and invalid, and so on, are all derived from the one fundamental pair, true and false. Now, true and false are applicable only, except in derivative significations, to propositions. Thus, wherever the above pairs can be significantly applied, we must be dealing either with propositions or with such incomplete phrases as only acquire meaning when put into a context which, with them, forms a proposition. Thus, such pairs of words can be applied to descriptions, footnote 1, Confer Principia Mathematica, Volume 1, Star 14, and Introduction, Chapter 3. For the definition of existence, confer Star 1402. End of footnote 1. But not to proper names. In other words, they have no application whatever to data, but only to entities or non-entities described in terms of data. Let us illustrate by the terms existence and non-existence. Given any datum x, it is meaningless either to assert or to deny that x exists. We might be tempted to say, of course x exists, for otherwise it could not be a datum. But such a statement is really meaningless, although it is significant and true to say, my present sense datum exists, and it may also be true that x is my present sense datum. The inference from these two propositions to x exists is one which seems irresistible to people unaccustomed to logic. Yet the apparent proposition inferred is not merely false, but strictly meaningless. To say, my present sense datum exists, is to say, roughly, there is an object of which the phrase, my present sense datum, is a description. But we cannot say, there is an object of which the word x is a description, because the word x is, in the case we are supposing, a name, not a description. Dr. Whitehead and I have explained this point fully elsewhere, local citation, with the help of symbols, without which it is hard to understand. I shall not, therefore, here repeat the demonstration of the above propositions, but shall proceed with their application to our present problem. The fact that existence is only applicable to descriptions is concealed by the use of what are grammatically proper names in a way which really transforms them into descriptions. It is, for example, a legitimate question whether Homer existed, but here the word Homer means the author of the Homeric poems and is a description. Similarly, we may ask whether God exists, but then the word God means the supreme being, or the ens realissimum, or whatever other description we may prefer. If the word God were a proper name, God would have to be a datum, and then no question could arise as to his existence. The distinction between existence and other predicates, which Kant obscurely felt, is brought to light by the theory of descriptions, and is seen to remove existence altogether from the fundamental notions of metaphysics. What has been said about existence applies equally to reality, which may in fact be taken as synonymous with existence. Concerning the immediate objects in illusions, hallucinations, and dreams, it is meaningless to ask whether they exist or are real. There they are, and that ends the matter. But we may legitimately inquire as to the existence or reality of things or other sensibilia inferred from such objects. It is the unreality of these things or other sensibilia, together with a failure to notice that they are not data, which has led to the view that the objects of dreams are unreal. We may now apply these considerations in detail to the stock arguments against realism, though what is to be said will be mainly a repetition of what others have said before. 1. We have first the variety of normal appearances, supposed to be incompatible. This is the case of the different shapes and colors which a given thing presents to different spectators. Locke's water, which seems both hot and cold, belongs to this class of cases. Our system of different perspectives fully accounts for these cases, and shows that they afford no argument against realism. 2. We have cases where the correlation between different senses is unusual. The bent stick in water belongs here. People say it looks bent, but is straight. This only means that it is straight to the touch, though bent to sight. There is no illusion, but only a false inference, if we think that the stick would feel bent to the touch. The stick would look just as bent in a photograph, and as Mr. Gladstone used to say, the photograph cannot lie. Footnote 1. Confer Edwin B. Holt, The Place of Illusory Experience in a Realistic World. The New Realism. Page 305. Both on this point and as regards seeing double. End of footnote 1. The case of seeing double also belongs here, though in this case the cause of the unusual correlation is physiological, and would therefore not operate in a photograph. It is a mistake to ask whether the thing is duplicated when we see it double. The thing is a whole system of sensibilia, and it is only those visual sensibilia which are data to the percipient that are duplicated. The phenomenon has a purely physiological explanation. Indeed, in view of our having two eyes, it is in less need of explanation than the single visual sense datum which we normally obtain from the things on which we focus. 3. We come now to cases like dreams, which may, at the moment of dreaming, contain nothing to arouse suspicion, but are condemned on the ground of their supposed incompatibility with earlier and later data. Of course, it often happens that dream objects fail to behave in the accustomed manner. Heavy objects fly, solid objects melt, babies turn into pigs, or undergo even greater changes. But none of these unusual occurrences need happen in a dream, and it is not on account of such occurrences that dream objects are called unreal. It is their lack of continuity with the dreamer's past and future that makes him, when he wakes, condemn them. And it is their lack of correlation with other private worlds that makes others condemn them. Omitting the latter ground, our reason for condemning them is that the things which we infer from them cannot be combined according to the laws of physics with the things inferred from waking sense data. This might be used to condemn the things inferred from the data of dreams. Dream data are no doubt appearances of things, but not of such things, as the dreamer supposes. I have no wish to combat psychological theories of dreams, such as those of the psychoanalysts. But there certainly are cases where, whatever psychological causes may contribute, the presence of physical causes also is very evident. For instance, a door banging may produce a dream of a naval engagement, with images of battleships and sea and smoke. The whole dream will be an appearance of the door banging, but owing to the peculiar condition of the body, especially the brain, during sleep, this appearance is not that expected to be produced by a door banging, and thus the dreamer is led to entertain false beliefs. But his sense data are still physical, and are such as a completed physics would include and calculate. 4. The last class of illusions are those which cannot be discovered within one person's experience except through the discovery of discrepancies with the experiences of others. Dreams might conceivably belong to this class if they were jointed sufficiently neatly into waking life. But the chief instances are recurrent sensory hallucinations of the kind that lead to insanity. What makes the patient in such cases become what others call insane is the fact that, within his own experience, there is nothing to show that the hallucinatory sense data do not have the usual kind of connection with sensibilia in other perspectives. Of course, he may learn this through testimony, but he probably finds it simpler to suppose that the testimony is untrue, and that he is being wilfully deceived. There is, so far as I can see, no theoretical criterion by which the patient can decide in such a case between the two equally satisfactory hypotheses of his madness and of his friend's mendacity. From the above instances, it would appear that abnormal sense data, of the kind which we regard as deceptive, have intrinsically just the same status as any others, but differ as regards their correlations or causal connections with other sensibilia and with things. Since the usual correlations and connections become part of our unreflective expectations, and even seem, except to the psychologist, to form part of our own data, it comes to be thought, mistakenly, that in such cases the data are unreal, whereas they are merely the causes of false inferences. The fact that correlations and connections of unusual kinds occur adds to the difficulty of inferring things from sense and of expressing physics in terms of sense data. But the unusualness would seem to be always physically or physiologically explicable, and therefore raises only a complication, not a philosophical objection. I conclude, therefore, that no valid objection exists to the view which regards sense data as part of the actual substance of the physical world, and that, on the other hand, this view is the only one which accounts for the empirical verifiability of physics. In the present paper, I have given only a rough preliminary sketch. In particular, the part played by time in the construction of the physical world is, I think, more fundamental than would appear from the above account. I should hope that with further elaboration, the part played by unperceived sensibilia could be indefinitely diminished, probably by invoking the history of a thing to eke out the inferences derivable from its momentary appearance. End of chapter 8.